Hi there! Hopefully in the next few videos we'll see the components of this little steam engine coming together, and in this video I'm going to be making the piston and aligning the cylinder and putting the sidebars on top. However, before getting onto that, I'd like to thank everybody for the help and support and advice provided. It really is very much appreciated, and in particular to Peter, aka Model Steamers. Peter came up with a great solution after I made the video number 7, I think it was, for the conrod. And when making the taper on the conrod, I used the compound slide, and Peter's suggestion was actually to use a boring head on the tailstock end and to put a dead centre on the boring head, offset it, which actually then offsets your workpiece, and then you can use the carriage feed and indeed power feed to cut the taper. Now I've not got a boring head. Well, I didn't have. I have now. So I'll show you how I think this solution would work. Well, a boring head has been on a list of things for me to buy for some time, and it seemed to be a good excuse to get one now. And this particular model that Peter suggested I bought comes with a 2MT taper. However, I also bought an R8 taper which fits this head, so that enables me to put it onto the mini mill as well. So Peter's solution is to obviously put this in the tailstock and make a dead centre to fit the end, and having done that, you just offset the head to whatever you need to offset it to put the work at an angle, and then having got the work at an angle, you can use the normal carriage feed and power feed even to cut the taper. So that's an absolutely fantastic solution, and one I'll use in future. So the piston rod is a piece of stainless steel, 1/8 of an inch in diameter, and I've cut it down to the required length, which is 2 19/32 of an inch, and I've just put a little bevel on each end. Now I need to use the tailstock die holder on the lathe to put 10 3/4 threads on the piston end and 13.5 threads on the other end. So these are 5 BA threads. I'm not too sure how easy that might be to do, but I'll have a go at doing that off camera on the lathe. Well, cutting the threads on the piston rod was quite easy, to be honest, but there has been a delay in proceedings because Tubal Kane goes on about making some labyrinth grooves in the piston. Now, I don't know anything about pistons or indeed labyrinth grooves, but Peter, aka Model Steamers, suggested that what I did was get some graphite yarn. So I've ordered some graphite yarn from Maidstone Engineering, and what my plan will be is to make one groove in here, 1/8 of an inch wide and 1/8 of an inch deep, and then I'll put this graphite yarn in there to act as a piston ring. But anyway, while this has been going on, in the meantime I thought I'd have a go at doing a bit of painting. You know, it's coming along. So anyway, on with the piston. So I'll go over to the lathe and have a go at turning it. So I've put the brass in this 3-jaw chuck, and I faced off this end, and I've drilled to 2.7mm in diameter, and I've tapped to 5 BA. Now the idea here is to reduce the diameter down to within 10 thou of what I'm aiming for, so it can fit in the cylinder. Now I'm aiming for let me see, 0.624 of an inch So I need to be turning this down to 0.634. It's currently 0.749, so that's 115 thou. I need to go, so divide that by 2 and it's just over 50 thou. So I'll take 50 thou off and then recheck the dimensions. Okay, so the diameter is exactly 10 thou over what I'm looking for in the cylinder, which is great. And now what I need to do is to make a groove in here, which is 1/8 of an inch wide and 1/8 of an inch deep. Now this parting tool is 1/16 of an inch. So, and the actual overall length of the piston is going to be 1/4 of an inch. So what I need to do is to cut the groove 1/16 of an inch away from the face. Now I calculate 1/8 of an inch on this lathe to be 3.175 millimeters. In fact, it will be on any lathe, it'd be that, wouldn't it? But actually, to turn the cross slide, I need 3 full turns plus 7 increments. So once I've touched the tool, I'll go in that far. So 0 on my dial. Looking for 3 full turns. So that should be spot on 1/8 of an inch. So I need to repeat the cut again to get 1/8 of an inch, because the tool is 1/16 of an inch wide. So once I've done that, I'll get back to you. Okay, and now I need to part it off to 1/4 of an inch. I think that'll be rather hot. So Tubal-Cain suggests at this stage putting the piston rod into the 3-jaw chuck and checking using the dial gauge to see how far it's out. Now, without any packing, it's out by about 3 to 4 thou. I've put some kitchen foil in against this particular jaw here, and I've got it to within 2 thou. So I'm going to settle for that. And I've marked up that jaw to tell me where to put the kitchen foil back. So Tubal-Cain suggests putting the piston in the 3-jaw chuck and then tightening the piston rod into there using the tailstock, and then using a ball peen hammer or something to just tap the end threads as they come through. Now I'm not going to do that. I've decided I'm going to use this Loctite 638. Then I'll go back to the lathe and then finish off. Okay, so I've put the piston rod back in the 3-jaw chuck and cleaned up the face of the piston. and the piston diameter is about 10 thou too much, so I need to reduce that. So I'll go in at a couple of thou increments at a time using power feed. I think we're there. Well, I've put the piston in the cylinder and put the ends on, and there's no graphite yarn on the piston yet, so it's just the brass piston running inside the cylinder. If I apply a bit of air, it works. So, really happy with that so far. Well, as you can see, my attempts at painting were an absolute disaster. What I omitted to do was to prime it, so all the top coat just peeled off. Anyway, I'll sort that out later on. And this stage is called alignment, and I think there's actually 3 stages to it. And the first stage is to make sure that the cylinder base is pressed down to the bed. We need to check the clearance at the bottom of the cross slide on these slides here. Now there is an ever so slight gap there, and the same on the other side. Now this crosshead needs to be barely touching, so that's a problem. Now if I move the crosshead to the other side, it does barely touch, so I'm happy with that. So there is some need for adjustment, and you adjust it by either adding shims or filing. Now it looks to me like I need to do some filing to remove some of the casting, but I need to give it some thought because I'm not exactly sure which bits to file and by how much. So I'll get back to you later with the result. Okay, so I should have realised that this first test didn't need the conrod to be attached to the crosshead. Anyway, it's made a little difference, but I've filed a little bit off the bottom of the cylinder. If I press that hard down, there is now no gap at the bottom of the crosshead, so that just moves nicely, just touches, which I think is what we're aiming for. So now on to stage 2. Okay, this next stage you need to get the crosshead running parallel with the guides, likewise the piston rod. Once you've done that, you clamp the cylinder in place, and then you attach the conrod. Now fortunately for me, the conrod just dropped into place, so no adjustment required. However, if it doesn't drop into place, what you need to do is either take some material off the side of this bearing here, or add some in the form of a washer. Now I'd already sort of jumped the gun on this, and earlier on I'd taken some material off that side. So I was quite fortunate that the amount of material I took off was indeed the correct amount. So that seems to turn quite nicely. And this final stage of cylinder alignment is moving the cylinder this way to make sure that you've got a 1/16 of an inch recess between the top of the piston and the edge of the cylinder when it's on full stroke. I'm just managed to get that. So now it's a matter of fixing the cylinder to the base, which looks like mission impossible from here, but we'll see how we do that later on. So I managed to drill one of the holes and tap it into the cylinder. However, I've changed my approach to a clumsy clamping setup to a lot more of a tidier one, and I've just made this very simple clamp. So that will enable me now to spot through these two holes into the cylinder. Then I can unclamp the cylinder and then drill and tap. And tapping the final hole in the cylinder. Okay, so I've drilled and tapped all three holes in the cylinder and screwed it to the base, and I must say it's very smooth, so I'm really happy with that. So now I need to make the slide rails and attach those. Well, the side bars are really straightforward. Once I've centred the drill and put a stop on the end, it's just a matter of drilling one side and switching it round and drilling the other side against the stop, and then repeating it for the other piece. So with the slide bars, I've decided to follow Tubal-Cain's design, and that is to put a slight taper on the top at each side. And to achieve that, I've put a couple of parallels in here and lifted this one up very slightly to give the angle, and held it in place by this stop here. Well, I think the slide bars have turned out pretty well, and I'm happy that I followed Tubal-Cain's design by putting sort of a taper on each side. I also drilled and tapped to 1/8 of an inch by 40 with a view to putting these little oilers in, and these oilers I got from Piston Engineering, and they were quite a good price, I think less than £3, but they look to be a little bit on the large side for these slide bars, so I think I'll be making my own. However, I think these oilers will look really good on the main bearings. Okay, so to work out where to drill the holes in the bed plate to hold the slide bars, what I've done is put this piece of 3/8 of an inch bar in here just as a guide, and I've put the original drill bit in the chuck that I used to drill the holes in the slide bars, and I've positioned the slide bars where I think that they should fit, and then I've positioned the chuck in the right position. So what I plan to do is to now remove the slide bar and use this Solcombe drill just to pre-drill the hole. Then I'll drill and tap. Then I'll put the screw in here just to hold it in place. Then I'll move over to this end and repeat the same process again, and then I'll do the back as well. Okay, so I've tapped the first hole and put a little 7BA bolt in there, and the distance between the holes is 1 15/16 of an inch, or it should be if I did it right in the first place. which equates to 1.9375. So if I multiply that by 25.4 to convert it to millimetres, I get 49.21. So if I move the x-axis 49.21 millimetres, I should end up in the centre there. So we'll give it a try. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40, 2, 4, 6, 48, 49, 41. Okay, so I'll take this off, and then I'll use the little Salcombe drill just to start the hole, and then I'll drill and tap to 7BA again. And I'm drilling to a depth of about 8 millimetres. So this is just a test fit without the spacers in, and I've just put the crosshead upside down. That seems to go very well. Obviously it will fit that way underneath when the spacers have been made. Well, we seem to cover quite a lot in that video, and this little steam engine is coming along very nicely. But before we get on to that, I'd like to thank in particular Kevin Morell for his help and support. Kevin is also in the process of making an S50, and he has found some of my videos quite interesting and informative. But again, thanks Kevin in particular for the support. But before we get on to this little engine, my next video is going to cover making the eccentric strap and eccentric sheave. Now I know nothing about any of that, but hopefully it'll turn out okay. So this little engine, off camera I made the little spacers to go underneath the slide bars, and these spacers are I think 4 thou higher than the side of the crosshead. Now Tubal Cain reckons that the gap should be around, well, between 1 and 3 thou. Mine's 4 thou. If it presents a problem, I can reduce each of these spacers. It is quite important to make sure that all these spacers are of identical length. I also made the gland nut off camera as well, and that's worked out very well. But all in all, I'm very happy with it, and it runs ever so smoothly. So I just can't wait to get on to the next stage. Anyway, I hope you like it.